What do you got?
I think I can prove to a judge that both of these men had the mens rea.
What the hell is a mens rea?
It's a legal term the lawyers use. It just means the intention to commit a crime.
Okay, come on, let's go.
Mens rea?
Put the cuffs on him.
How could we have gotten mens rea? We take blood? Can you do it without taking blood? We both use condoms. How is this possible? I want to see a doctor. Can I have an independent blood test?
Money!
I feel sick.
What are you doing?
Mens rea! Oh! Oh! My God! No!
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Hi, it's me, vacationing in the mountains of northern Utah with the most amazingly jury-rigged system ever. This could go fairly smoothly, or this could go horrifically wrong. We'll just have to see what's happening. Because I've got my tablet, which I can't share screens with my tablet, but I can do a split screen. So what I've got like half of my tablet screen is the StreamYard Studio, and half of it is my notes, and is precariously balanced on the side because I'm broadcasting from the legendary closet inside this is the essentially the walk-in closet room for my sister. All the clothes and stuff are over here. The tablet is perched precariously on on one of the ends of the daybed, and this is the snake cage over here. The snake is in the aquarium over here. So here we are. No, I can read chat fine, foo. But the thing about reading is it's like in this area between no glasses and where I see fine with my glasses. So it's kind of blurry. So anyway, that's where we're going. I hope everything is fine. I hope the audio is good. I hope the video is good because I can't check any of it. What we're doing today is we are doing day 17 of the Karen Reed murder trial. Finally got around to watching it today in its entirety. And when this gets done, I'm immediately leaving in 57 minutes to go camping for a couple of days. I'll watch day 18 while I'm up there, and yeah, we'll see what we can do for next week. Yeah, so let's just get on with it, shall we? This is going to be a long review because it was very, very interesting. This is the day that ATF Agent Brian Higgins was on the stand the entire day, direct and cross-examination. So how we'll work this, I'm just going to, normally I would record this and then edit it a little bit, the beginning and the end and whatnot, and then upload it. But I can't do that here on the fly on my tablet, so I'm just going to do a live review. So if you don't like it, suck it. I don't know what else to do. Right. Shall we begin, people? It's so nice to see everybody here. We've got 174 people here watching this day 17 review. I know we've already done day 18, but we're still on day 17 for me. All right, here's my notes that I took. Don't tease us, says paralegal Liz Brower. Oh, I guess the good thing is I can. Oh my God, Angel from Australia with the Aussie 20. Imagine ship's bells. I don't have my soundboard here, obviously. Oh, hey, this is interesting. When I do click on the chats, I can't read them. So this is what the chat says. Now let me read it. The super chat. No, not you. Jeff, you are officially my favorite YouTuber. Aw, come on. I mean, you're effing hilarious in your sleep. Come on. Oh, hey. Thanks, Angel. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you, Chris. I don't want you to. All right. Let's get down to it here. Day 17 started with Brian Higgins being called to the stand. He worked 15 years as a firefighter and 15 years as an ATF agent. And he said that he went. We know that it's been testified by a bunch of people. He went to New York on the 27th for the funeral of two cops, and then he came back on the 27th. He went up alone, And when he came back with Kevin Albert, Brian Albert, and another guy. Now, just listening to the testimony, he said that he didn't take his work vehicle that he drove back from New York. He didn't take that vehicle to the first bar because he says the ATF has a policy against drinking and driving a government vehicle. Well, apparently the ATF doesn't have a policy against drinking and driving your personal vehicle, because he proceeded to drink quite a bit that night and drive. He did testify that he drinks Jameson and ginger. You know, as a drink critic, Jameson and ginger ale is a pretty decent highball drink. Won't judge him too harshly for that until cross-examination, and we'll judge him a little bit on this. He testified that Brian Albert is a close friend, and he repeatedly said he was a close friend. SoCo, no. He said there were no arguments at the bars, and that he left around midnight. Shortly, he said he left the last bar around midnight, which was shortly after Karen Reed and John O'Keefe arrived, within 30 minutes. He said he's known Reed and O'Keefe for about 1 year, and he considers them to be friends. That comes into question a little bit later, I think, calling them friends. Oh, yeah. Taylor Quickby says that Jameson and ginger. Yeah, Jameson and ginger. But he said that Brian Albert was a close friend, and he said that O'Keefe and Reed were close friends. Well, he didn't say close friends; he just said friends for them. But again, as we're going to look at it a little bit, it may not be so friendly. He said he's known them for about a year, as I mentioned, and he mentioned sending a flirty text message to Karen when she arrived at the bar. Well, that, of course, triggers the later reading of the text messages between Higgins and Karen Reed, which unfortunately we'll get to here in a minute. After the bar, he went to Brian Albert's house, and he said he parked by the mailbox. He did a little plowing in the driveway and then parked in front of the mailbox. He was asked to list everybody in the house, which everybody else has been asked to do. And interestingly enough, like everybody else, he listed everybody in the house when he arrived. But as with everybody else, he failed to mention Colin Albert being in the house. Everybody very suspiciously and very notably tends to leave Colin Albert out of the list of people who were in the house. Well, he was a little bit disappointed by what was going on over at the Albert's house. And he said he was one of the first people to leave because they only had beer, and he's not a beer drinker. Exactly, Liz. Plowing in the driveway is for teens. He left the party. He was one of the first people to leave the party, or the group at the Albert house, because they only had beer. But while he was there, he texted John O'Keefe and asked where he was. Where he said, "Are you coming to the house?" With, I think there was three question marks, but he didn't get a response. Oh, Kestrel, we'll get there. He doesn't remember meeting, and then because he was noticeably left off the list of people that were in the house when he arrived, he said he doesn't remember meeting Colin Albert. And then they got this really weird and pointless explanation of how to use the plow on the Jeep, how to raise it and lower it, and then tilt the blade. It was unnecessary, but that's what we've come to expect from the prosecution, is just a continued over explanation of things. Well, after he left the house, after he left the Albert house, he went to the police station. He said to get keys to the surveillance vehicle. Then he went home. He said he got home sometime between 1:30 and 2 a.m. He likely ate and drank some more and slept. But now this is the guy who testified that he had 3 to 4 Jameson and Gingers at the first bar. He maybe had 2 at the second bar. So dude, in the space of a couple of hours, was driving with 6 Jameson Gingers in his system. Julio, thank you so much. Said fish stick. Sure, Jenny. He was talking about the device that controls the Jeep blade. He called it a fish stick. That I thought that was a little bit odd, but he called it a fish stick. Well, yeah, what do you want me to do about it? So the ATF agent had 6 Jameson and Gingers in him when he was driving home. So that's why I said apparently the ATF doesn't have any policy problems with drinking a lot and driving your own vehicle. Just don't drive a government vehicle. So then he drank some more when he got home, ate a little bit, and went to sleep. He said right about 6:30 a.m., he said both his work phone and his personal phone started to blow up. And by blow up, he meant he got 1 call each. Chief Berkowitz called him on his phone and on his work phone, and Brian Albert called him on his personal phone. He ignored the first call from the chief, but then because he said, he always calls me in the morning sometimes, but Brian Albert calling him in the morning was really weird. So he picked up the Brian Albert call, and that's when he learned that John had been found on his front lawn. So he said he went to the Brian Albert's house right around 7 a.m. And Julie Albert showed up later with some donuts, which was their tradition for birthdays, I guess. And he said that when Brian Albert called, that's when he learned that O'Keefe was found dead on his front lawn, and that's why he rushed on over. He said he stayed at the Albert house for less than an hour. Then he went back to the police station to try to make sense of the situation. Air quotes from me. Yeah, air quotes added. Because he says, well, why did he go back to the police station? To make sense of the situation. He was trying to fit the pieces in his mind together because he couldn't wrap his mind around it. So he went to the police station to do that rather than his home. That sat as really, really weird to me. That explanation was just strange. Then on February 3rd, so the accident happened the night of the 28th, morning of the 29th. And then he met with Trooper Proctor and Buchanan on February 3rd. And that's when he provided texts with O'Keefe, the text that he'd sent with John O'Keefe, and text that he'd sent with the defendant. And he'd given them screenshots. And he has asked. He said he gave these texts voluntarily. He was never asked for them, but he gave them voluntarily because he wanted to be fully transparent. He said nothing was deleted, and he'd volunteered the texts. Julie O, thank you so much for the $10. That is very, very, very much appreciated. And that says, because I can't read them while they're up on the screen. Lally says, were you drunker than Cooter Brown when you drove that night? Everyone except Karen Reed. Yes, Lally. Karen Reed, we are charging you with drinking while operating a killdozer. That's a good point. She's the one that people consistently said wasn't drinking. She just had a drink in her hand and nobody saw her get more. But yeah, she's the one. That's actually a very good point. I know I mispronounced Buchanan's name for those of you in chat, but great successes. Are you still in Las Vegas? Nope, I'm in Utah. I'm in my sister's walk-in closet area. So, oh dear, the texts with Karen. We're getting there. He said he had some texts with Karen. He said that on the balance, he had more texts between him and Karen than he did between him and John O'Keefe. He went to O'Keefe's house once, he said, to watch a football game. I think this was January 16th, if I remember the date correctly. I didn't write it down. Or maybe January 12th, maybe it was. I don't know. Somewhere around there. But anyway, he went to O'Keefe's house to watch the end of a football game. And they were drinking, got drunk, and he was concerned that he possibly broke a game controller from one of John's nephews, game controllers, which I thought was a really strange thing for him to admit, because he was drinking on the night of the incident, and the previous time that he's recorded as drinking, he apparently was worried that he'd become violent and threw a controller and broke it. So that shows sort of a propensity for violence when he's drunk, which I thought was a little bit odd to testify to. And that was the time he started texting with Karen, and he gave her the nickname Weed Whacker. He gave her the name Weed Whacker because of a story where he pulled up in front of her house where she was using a weed whacker to cut weeds. So, mushroom, snake. Sorry, I'm back. Badger. Mushroom. Anyway, that's old school for you people. So he gave her the nickname Weed Whacker, and then they went through this for about 40 minutes. Went through these texts between Higgins and Reed, which were bad. I mean, they were not like bad as in particularly relative. They were just bad texts. Some of you may have read or heard the Chad Daybell fantasy fiction that he was writing. This was worse. This was like two middle school cringe kids texting each other. I said, oh my God, these texts were bad. It was like this weird bad romance novel. They started getting a little bit flirty with each other. They expressed their mutual hotness for each other. The other person was hot, and the other one's oh yeah, you too. But then we learned that this night that they came over to O'Keefe's house, that when he left, Karen had walked him out to his car and kissed him somewhere between a peck on the cheek and a makeout. They didn't say what. And before we get too far away, Julie O with a $5 says, oh, Weed Whacker, one who sucks golf balls through a garden hose. Thank you very much for that. That was, yes, Jules did have wicked. It was wicked cringe. That was some wicked cringe text right there. So they continued to read through these text messages where he was trying to suss her out. She's like, hey, what's next? She's like, I don't know. What do you think's next? Well, I don't know. What do you think next? Well, you asked first. Well, but yeah, but I'm asking you. But no, you can't do it. It was literally like middle school kids going this, do you like me? Check yes or no. Yes, Teresa, they were asked if they had banged, if he wanted to bang. That question was posed, but so he's trying to suss her out, and he said, oh yeah, I liked you from the first time I saw you. And then he just said one of the most cringy things ever whilst attempting to suss her out. Quote, you think you can handle me? Dude, no. Just, even in jest, never text a woman, you think you can handle me? It was sad. But what it boils down to was he admitted that he was looking to smash his friend's woman. He was like, hey, I thought you're still in the relationship. Oh, I don't know how the relationship. He wanted to smash his friend because he described John O'Keefe as a friend. He wanted to smash, he wanted to bang his friend's woman. Total violation of just about every possible bro code out there. So that tells me that either this guy is a complete dirt pig, or perhaps John O'Keefe wasn't really as much of a friend as he was letting on. Hey, Audrey, welcome. Thank you for stopping by, and we'll catch you on the replay tomorrow. Island brings up a good point. She wanted sex and he wanted snuggles. It's usually the other way around, right? The dude wants to smash and the girl wants the long-term spooning. But this was like the opposite. It was weird. And Irish I was drunk with the €2. Thank you so much, Irish I was drunk. And I got to unclick you there. Hey, Jeff, hope you're enjoying yourself. I am. I'm having a good time. So, yeah. You just, as Project Metal Music says, it's just wrong. You just don't do that. So anyway, he kind of admits to wanting to smash his friend's woman. He's like, oh, seriously, it was like, OMG. Do you like? Oh, it was really sad. Now, Karen, from the texts we learned that perhaps Karen wasn't too fond of John O'Keefe's nephew and niece and the kids. Was it a nephew and a niece or two kids? It was a boy and a girl. I can't remember. But anyway, the two kids didn't seem to be too fond of them. Oh, and props. We'll have to give props to Higgins because at one point in the text exchange, he did call her babe. Say, hey, babe. You have the Badger song in your head. Good. All right, now a very important part here. This is actually a very, very important part that I think needs to be highlighted from this testimony. It came out in the text messages that John O'Keefe had seen Karen walk Higgins out to his car. Because he had a ring video, he had a ring camera on the door, and he said Karen said that he showed her this repeatedly, and even asked, Christ, are you guys hooking up? And she said, well, no. And of course, that freaked Higgins out. He's like, oh my God, did he see us kiss? And she's like, no, I know where the cameras are. So apparently this kiss happened where the camera couldn't catch it. But now, see, this is the thing. I think that's particularly important because if O'Keefe is watching her walk Higgins out to the car and he's like, Christ, are you guys hooking up? Could be a little jealous, could be a little angry, could maybe have gone over to the house that night. We already know that Higgins has a propensity for violence when he gets drunk because he thought he may have thrown a game controller across the room. So perhaps he's like, hey, were you kissing my wife a week and a half or 2 weeks ago? Are you smashing my woman? Not girlfriend, not wife. But yeah, are you like, hooking up with my woman a couple of weeks? And it could have escalated into a fight. So I think that's kind of a particularly relevant piece of information. Now, we also learned from these text messages that Karen actually eventually, one of them got the balls to just say, look, want to come over to my place? That's all they had to do. She went over to his house, and again, listening to this conversation that they reportedly had, it was more of the same awkward, well, now you're here, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? And eventually nothing happened. It was basically a face-to-face continuation of the text messages. So she actually gets to his house and they still do nothing. Dude is a wuss. Dude is just a straight up beta wuss. I mean, seriously. It's not like he was being a gentleman saying, okay, you're my friend's girlfriend. Ain't nothing happening here. No, he was just a pussy that was too afraid to ask. He said I didn't want to be weaponized against someone else. So he needed to know exactly where they stand, where her and John stood, where he and her stood, because he didn't want to be weaponized against someone else. And then, of course, the last text was John was dead, and he had no further conversation with her after that. And that's when the direct examination ended. Angel, I don't know for her address. Her address has got to be out there somewhere. I don't know. Mashiro Yara, welcome all the way from Japan. I'll be back in Korea in a week. Yay! Now, see, this is the thing. None of this proves that Karen did anything. I mean, it proves maybe she wasn't sure where this was going. She didn't, she was looking maybe at somebody else, but they never sealed the deal. They never smashed. They never banged. They never hooked up. Flux, what's up? And, well, we'll get into it a little bit later in cross-examination, but basically, I mean, we kind of learned that she wasn't sure what was going on. Nothing shows that she did this. To the contrary, these text messages sort of set up a scenario where O'Keefe and Higgins may have had a beef because O'Keefe may have thought Higgins was trying to hook up or was hooking up with his woman, and he may have confronted him and given the propensity for violence, implicit in wondering whether or not being so drunk that he didn't know whether or not he threw a game controller across the room. I think overall the direct examination helped the defense's case. So anyway, they start the cross-examination. One thing that was interesting, the first questions right out of the gate, we learned that Higgins brought his personal lawyer with him. So that was kind of interesting. He had his lawyer watching with him. Now, it seems that Higgins had some sort of mail. He received some sort of mail that he turned over to the state police. The defense sort of seemed to wonder what that was. They went to a sidebar and then it was dropped forever. So I don't know. I have no idea what that piece of mail was all about. He testified in under cross-examination that he had access to the police station based on his relationship with the police chief. The police chief had allowed him to have an office there, and he got a key card that could access pretty much everywhere except for the evidence locker and the armory. He also testified that he's no longer in the field. He's been put on a desk job. He's been given desk duty with the ATF. There was no explanation of why that happened or the reason why that happened, but the point was made that he's no longer working in the field. Then he went back to talking about the bar. Again, he confirmed that he drank 3 to 4 Jameson and gingers. Then he drove to the next bar. Okay, I did write the date. January 16th was the date that Karen Reed kissed him. He said the defense lawyer asked if it was like a peck on the cheek or a peck on the lips. He said no, it was more than a peck. But then he was shown text from another hearing, one of the grand jury hearings, where he said it was just a peck, and he said agreed. So he said, okay, now you're saying it was more than a peck, but when you testified previously, you testified it was just a peck. He said, oh, it was. When I agreed that it was just a peck, it was a figure of speech. I'm not lying. It's just a figure of speech I was using. He said they had no intimate contact whatsoever except for the kiss. The kiss was the only intimate contact they had. And there was this whole thing about, he didn't want to. His cross-examination is weird, just like everybody else. They're unnecessarily combative. They're nitpicking, and most of the witnesses on cross-examination have come across as just completely unlikable, horrible people. And no exception here, because he was like, you never had any other physical contact with her except for the kiss, right? He said, well, I don't know about physical contact. He's like, well, I'm not talking about shaking hands. He's like, well, I'd want to be sure. And they fought back and forth for quite a long time before he said, okay, intimate contact. Well, what's intimate? It was unnecessary, and it was stupid, and it was all kinds of dumb. Now, then they had this big argument about whether or not he was attracted to her. Because the defense was like, okay, you did this because you were romantically attracted to her and you wanted clarity. So you were this is why you were being kind of wishy-washy in your texts. And he's like, well, I wasn't romantically attracted to her. I was interested in her. He's like, well, why were you interested in her? Well, to see where it was going to go. He said, well, you were interested to see where I wanted to go because you were romantically attracted. No, I wasn't. He refused to admit that he was romantically attracted to her. And he's like, well, what does romantic mean to you? And she will like giving her flowers. And so finally, again, this was a perfect example of the pointlessness of this unnecessary combativeness. He wouldn't admit that he was romantically attracted to her, but he did admit that he was sexually attracted to her. If I wanted to look better in front of the jury, I would say, yeah, I was romantically attracted to her, not I'm sexually attracted to her. He came off looking really stupid because he'd been forced to admit to something that sounds a little more salacious than what was being asked. And at that point, he started to get really squirrely with his answers. And from that point on, it was just like pulling teeth to get him to admit to almost anything, or not even to testify to anything. He testified that in these text messages and in conversations, that Karen Reed had never said anything bad about John O'Keefe. Then suddenly the text stopped on January 23rd. And between January 23rd and January 29, there were no texts. The first text on the 29th was John's dead, and that was the end. He testified that he told his supervisor at the ATF about the kiss, but he didn't tell Albert. He didn't tell Brian Albert while they were in the car for 4 hours driving back from New York or any other time. He just told his boss, which is kind of weird. I don't know why he'd tell his boss, but he did. Then they went back to the bar, the last bar they were at, the Waterfall, I believe it was. He said that when he got to the Waterfall, he had a couple more whiskeys. Oh, and that was the other thing. He was nitpicking about this Jameson and ginger. Because the prosecutor, the defense lawyer said you had the whiskey and sodas. Yeah, I didn't have whiskey and soda. I had Jameson and ginger. Now, look, hate to tell him this, but Jameson is a whiskey, and ginger ale is a soda-based drink. So it kind of is a whiskey soda, but he wanted to clear Jameson and ginger. Flux just wants whiskey. Flux, you had enough whiskey in Vegas. Flux is awesome. All right, so they got through this Jameson and ginger thing, and he said while they were at the bar. Oh, okay. This was another freaking fight they had. He said, so you'd stop texting on the 23rd, but then you ran into her in the bar on the 28th, and she ignored you. He said, no, she didn't ignore me. He said, well, she didn't pay any attention to you. She didn't ignore me. Well, did she greet you? She didn't shake your hand. She didn't give you a hug. She didn't talk to you. So isn't that being ignored? No, that's not being ignored. So it's like literally didn't look at him, didn't talk to him, didn't greet him, didn't hug him, didn't shake his hand, but didn't ignore him. So, well, she sat almost as far away from you as is possible to sit from you. Well, yeah, but still, to the bitter end, he refused to admit that she was ignoring him. And then that's when he texted her in the bar. He while they're sitting there, he's texting her. He's clearly being ignored, whether he wants to be ignored or not. He's texting her, what? And she didn't respond. Well, then they skipped ahead to this testimony he gave to the federal grand jury, where he testified that a tall, dark-haired male entered the house. And he'd previously, up until the grand jury, the federal grand jury, he had never mentioned that person. Well, then he said, no, I never testified that a tall, dark male entered the house. And so we had to get into this big battle again, to where the defense lawyer had to take him back to the federal grand jury testimony to testify that there was a male had entered the house. The male was described as dark-haired, and he was kind of tall. So eventually, after going through this long rigmarole, he did finally confirm that, yes, he did testify previously that a tall, dark-haired male had entered the house. Absolute waste of time, made him look more foolish than ever. Then he testified again that the car was facing the flagpole. He parked in front of Brian Albert's house, facing the flagpole, which would have meant that the flagpole, he said, was about as 1 o'clock. And he's saying, well, okay, you're facing that direction, you're seeing there, you can see through the windshield, the snowplow isn't blocking your view, and you've got your headlights on, and you didn't see a body. Yes, he said, no, I didn't see a body. And you didn't see a 217-pound man bleeding out on Brian Albert's lawn. He said, nope, never saw the body. And then he testified that, because previously he testified that he went to the station to get some keys to a surveillance vehicle. That's what he testified to on direct examination. But on cross-examination, he said he went to the police station to move 2 vehicles. Then the defense lawyer said, well, this story seems to have been evolving quite a bit. 5 days after the accident, or after the incident, he testified, he told Proctor that he went to the station to fulfill some administrative obligations. Then on April 28th, I believe it was the federal grand jury testimony, he said he went to the station to do some administrative work. So he had to fulfill some administrative obligations, to do some administrative work, to moving 2 vehicles. And when asked to explain that, he said, well, the administrative work I was doing was moving 2 vehicles. So yeah, the moving 2 vehicles is administrative work, I guess. Then they went to his house. The house, he put his personal and his work phone on his nightstand. And then he testified there were absolutely no phone calls from the time that he arrived at home until 6:30 a.m. He arrived at home right around 2 a.m. I think he said 1:32 a.m. There was no phone calls whatsoever between that time and 6:30 a.m. when the chief called him, the police chief called him. But they raised, you remember, during Brian Albert's testimony, testified that he and his wife, either he was sleeping, he had his phone on the bed, his wife's phone on the bed, his glasses on the bed, and they were either sleeping and he butt dialed Higgins, or they were smashing each other. They were getting a little frisky with each other, and in the throes of their passion, he butt dialed Higgins. That was Brian's testimony. Well, there was 2 calls with Brian Albert after he arrived home that night. Around 2:20 was the 1-second call. But he said, yeah, I have no recollection of any phone calls. So he did the same thing Brian Albert did. He denied any phone calls whatsoever. Didn't happen, didn't do it, no idea. Must have been a butt dial. So he gets the butt dial from Brian Albert at around 2:20 for 1 second. And then 17 seconds later, he says he butt dialed Albert for 22 seconds. They had a 22-second butt conversation. So literally, we've got Jennifer McCabe. Was she like butt dialed 7 times? Around that area. Albert butt dialed Higgins, and then 17 seconds later, Higgins butt dials Albert. I've maybe made 3 butt dials in my entire life, and none of them after smartphones came along, because it's very, very difficult to butt dial someone from a smartphone. But yeah, everybody is butt dialing everybody that night. Yes, that was the thing. The 22-second butt dial from Higgins to Albert, which is of course on the heel of Albert's butt dial to Higgins. Like 4 minutes after the Higgins butt dial was when the how long to die in the cold Google search was made, but that was objected to and it was stricken from the record. So I wasn't going to mention that, but chat did mention it. So yeah, there's a whole Mike and M. There is a whole lot of butt action in this group. And then for some reason he felt the need to say under oath, "I always tell the truth." And he emphasized always. I always tell the truth. Look, we're humans. If any human tells you, "I always tell the truth," you know that's a lie. Not everybody always tells the truth. That's just a fact. Anyways, he continued through this entire line of questioning. He refused to admit that he made any calls. That's what the records say. He said, I didn't call anybody. I didn't speak to anybody. Well, the record says there was a 22-second call. I didn't do it. I have no idea what it was. And then he said the 22 seconds is a long time. He said that's a long time. And he said, no, 22 seconds is 22 seconds. And then he was asked, well, 22 seconds is long enough to have a conversation, isn't it? And he said, no. He refused to admit that 22 seconds is long enough for a conversation. Continued to say 22 seconds is too short for a conversation. And then the defense lawyer wanted to do what I said needed to be done during opening statements. And that was to sit for 22 seconds and see how long 22 seconds is. So I'm going to do that now. We're going to have 22 seconds of silence to show you how long it really, really is. So 22 seconds starting now. That was 22 seconds. 22 seconds is much longer than people realize. You can say a lot in that bit of silence that we just had there. But he said, no, that's too short to have any sort of meaningful conversation. No. And again, he said it was a butt dial, and there's so much butt dialing going on. He said he didn't make any calls. He didn't speak to anybody, regardless of what the record shows. But the interesting thing was the defense brought up that he had previously testified that he called Brian Albert back. Yeah, his previous testimony that he gave in other proceedings had nothing to do with a butt dial. He said he called them back, but they didn't have a conversation. They must have just sat in silence for 22 seconds. And then again, he continued to admit, he said even though that was his previous testimony, he still refused to admit that he made the call. And then they shifted to the vehicle. Nobody ever asked to look at his car. Nobody ever asked, ever asked to look at or inspect Higgins' vehicle that was there at the scene of this alleged murder. And apparently at the precise time that Karen's SUV arrived at the station, the precise time that the vehicle arrived at the station is missing from the log. They're not sure exactly what time it arrived. He said he hung around the police station all day, and during the day he talked to Brian Albert throughout the day. He also talked about the case, about what happened, but he also talked to Kevin Albert, who works in the station, and the chief, but they didn't talk about this at all. He wants us to believe that Kevin Anderson had a brother who had a dead body found on his lawn, but he never talked about it that day with ATF Agent Higgins. I didn't find that particularly believable. And so the implication was that he was hanging around to collect information, to sort of eavesdrop, to sort of listen to what's going on around the station, and to feed that information on the status of the investigation to Brian Albert. I almost said Brian Adams, to Brian Albert, but he denied that. He denied doing that. Said he had many conversations with Brian Albert, Kevin Albert, the chief. They had a meeting. Okay, I need to emphasize this a little bit more. He testified. He gave an interview with Proctor 5 days after the incident. Now, before he gave this interview, his first and only apparent interview with Proctor, he'd had several conversations with Brian Albert, with Kevin Albert, with the police chief, and had a meeting with everybody that was there in the house to talk about what had happened. All of this happened before he gave his statement to Proctor. Again, implying that they had a lot of time to get their story straight. Now, Chief Berkowitz said that he personally saw taillight pieces when he drove by. And so, I guess Berkowitz called Higgins and said, "Hey, guess what I saw?" But he said, no, it was Brian Albert that called him. Brian Albert called him and said, "Hey, you'll never guess what they found." And that was the taillight pieces, allegedly. Tracy Fagan has been a member for 2 months. Says, is the CW really going to challenge Celebrite? What happened to all the other cases? I don't know what that means. CW. I don't know what CW is. Really going to challenge Celebrate. What happened? Maybe something happens in day 18 that I'm not aware of, Tracy, but having only seen day 17, I have no idea what that means. I apologize, and I'm sorry. And Phoenix, who's been a member for 9 months, says, good evening. Well, good meeting to you, Phoenix. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Again, I'm sorry, Tracy. I have no idea what you're talking about. I apologize. It's just me. And Blue Varro, thank you so much, Blue Varro, for becoming the newest member. Oh, sorry. No, it says you're a member for 14 months. Sorry, it was I was thinking that was kind of weird that you said you were a new member. All right, member for 14 months. Thank you. Oh, the Commonwealth. All right. Thank you, Blue Varro. The Commonwealth is going to challenge. Oh, did they say they're going to? All right. Okay, everybody. God, I see. It's Commonwealth. Jesus, leave me alone. Okay, so the Commonwealth have they said they're going to challenge the Celebrite stuff? Oh, that sounds interesting. Well, see, that's okay. God, stop texting Commonwealth. Jesus, let me get down. Okay, there we go. Oh. They call it the Commonwealth because it's the Commonwealth. It's sort of kind of not a state. It's a Commonwealth. Like Kentucky's a Commonwealth as well. All right. So cases are handled in isolation. If they challenge the Celebrite data in one case, it wouldn't affect the other cases. And that's one thing the defense lawyers do quite well, is in one case they'll argue that a particular evidence collection method is absolutely infallible, and then their next defendant they'll be arguing is complete and utter trash and can't be trusted. So it'll just be that way. Jeff, your eyes look as red as the devil's. My eyes aren't red at all. Maybe I don't know. It might just be the dark lighting in here, but nope. Sorry. All right, let's get back to this here. Got like 10 minutes left here. Jeez, I got to hustle. Right here. Oh yeah, then he testified that previously, when in the previous testimony, I believe it was the federal grand jury testimony, that I said I didn't do anything wrong here. He felt like they were being accusatory. Oh, it was during his questioning. He said, "Yeah, I felt they were accusing me." So I told them I didn't do anything wrong here. Then he testified he knows how to get rid of phone data. You can wipe the phone. You can do a factory reset. I said, you might be able to remove the SIM card, but he doesn't know if that would completely help. Jeff, does that mean you approve of red Solo cups for holding evidence, Lamau? Thank you, Rob Price. That would be a negative. I can't conceive of a time when that would be appropriate. So, interesting things happen here. All this phone dating, and this is all under cross-examination. He called his best friend. His best friend on earth happens to work at the ATF, and he's a digital forensics expert. And he asked his digital forensic expert friend at the ATF, who happens to also be his very, very best friend on planet Earth, how you could pull text strings from a phone to provide it to law enforcement. He didn't give his phone to the police for the police to extract the information. They could have given him his entire phone, but he cherry-picked what he was going to give to the authorities. And the defense, in this line of questioning, is implying that Higgins improperly used federal resources to extract phone info for a case that he's not officially involved in. He's just a witness. There was a big objection. The jury left for quite a while, and Higgins' lawyer came in, and they asked Higgins a few questions with his lawyer standing right next to him at the witness box. I was waiting for possibly a Fifth Amendment plea, but it didn't happen. I was kind of depressed. And he asked, so they reviewed his proffer of evidence. And with his lawyer, with Higgins' lawyer standing right next to him, the defense asked him questions about utilizing federal resources for personal gain. He's only a witness in the case. He's not an investigator in the case. Because what they did is they went to the local when they extracted these text messages, they went to the local FBI office and used the local FBI equipment that law enforcement officers are allowed to use as part of their official duties. And so again, they're making this implication that he's improperly using federal resources. And was Higgins aware that doing that using federal resources for personal gain is a federal offense? He said, okay. The judge said she was going to allow the questions. So Higgins talks with his lawyer, and then they bring the jury back in, and they proceeded to ask the questions. And he answered the questions. He said that, yes, he did this. He admitted to using federal resources for personal gain. Which he sort of kind of admitted to a felony, it seems like. But he said, although we extracted the information, the data was still left on the phone. Well, this is where, this was right at the end of the day, and this is where it got a little bit interesting. He said, the data wasn't destroyed. I left the data on the phone. Next question from the defense was, well, where's the phone? I don't have it, replies Higgins. Oh, you destroyed it, responds the defense lawyer. No, I didn't destroy it. I threw it away. Yeah, he didn't destroy it. He threw the phone away. And then Higgins was asked about the court ordered not to destroy, damage, alter, manipulate, or whatever, any phone data that was handed down on September 30th. Well, you may remember that Brian Albert got a phone for his birthday earlier in the year. And finally, he decided to change his phone. So he turns his phone into the phone store. The day before this September 30th order was served. On the 29th, Brian Albert turned his phone in to the store and it was gone. Well, conveniently, coincidentally, Higgins also changed his phone number and carrier and destroyed, and he changed his carrier and changed numbers the day before the order to preserve the phone data was served. But the interesting thing was, Apparently, he destroyed the phone about a month after the order was served on him. He said he took the SIM card out and cut it or broke it and then destroyed it. Now, this is where it ended. It ended on a very, very strange note. The question was, so you drove to a military base and threw the SIM card in one dumpster and the phone in a different dumpster. And he said, not correct. Then, just as the defense was asking a follow-up question, the judge says, that's your last question. We're done for the day. Come back on Tuesday. So again, the judge cut the defense off right at a key point in the testimony. Right when he was going to follow up on this, you drove to a military base, you took the SIM card out, you chucked it in one dumpster, you chucked the phone in a different dumpster. No, I didn't do that. And then he wasn't allowed to ask any more follow-up questions. I don't like when the judge does that. It just looks terrible. It looks bad. And yeah, Teresa says, of course she did. That's where the day ended. So, well, I've got about 3 minutes more here to go. So, have to do my thanks, and then I'm heading up to the campground. I've downloaded day 18, and while I'm chilling around the campfire with the family, having some good drinks, we'll do that. I'll watch that and we'll review it later. All right. Well, thanks for meeting here with me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating. Yeah, thanks for the support, guys. Mods, you guys are super awesome and doing everything perfectly, wonderfully well. Let's find out what happens. I understand that the medical examiner is finally going to testify that he's dead. That'll be a good thing. We'll finally learn on day 18 that John O'Keefe is in fact dead. But thank you, people, for being here. Thank you so much for the support and everything that you guys have done. Deeply appreciate it. Thanks for keeping me company, and thanks for keeping each other company. I'll see you, I don't know, in a few days. But if you want to see more of me, about 90 minutes from now, I'll be over on Danny on Direct's birthday stream. So see me there in about 90 minutes. All right, peeps. You guys take care. I'll see you later, and thanks again for joining. Bye, everybody. Let me give you the outro here. Where's the outro? Can I do the outro? I hate this stupid tablet. Oh, there. Okay, you can get the outro. Can you get the outro? I don't think so. Damn it. Nope. Doesn't look like it. I hate this stupid thing. All right. Maybe if I would just. Oh, there it is. Okay. Bye, people. See